Hi, and welcome to the video for Wednesday, February 4th. In this video, we're mostly just going to be talking about strings. In the previous video, we touched on them slightly. There are several functions for them that you should be familiar with, and the point of this video is just to show you those functions. Before we do that, though, we need to talk about a data type called character. So we'll talk about that for a little while, and then most of the time we'll be focusing on strings. So here are the 5 data types that we know about. We can create variables of these types. Integer, long, which are both integer data types, right? Store integers. Long is just for bigger numbers. Float and double, which are for decimals, and double is just for bigger decimals, for longer decimals. And string, which stores strings of English. The next data type I want to talk about is called character, and it's abbreviated just char. So you can create variables of type char or type character. And a character is what you think it is. It's just a single character. So like a capital letter D or a percentage sign or even an empty space is a character. So it's just a string of length 1 essentially, but you can save lowercase letters, uppercase letters, ampersands, question marks, even a return character, the \n. All of those things can be stored as characters. There's one thing to notice about the way you give values to characters. You use single quotation marks. So my character 1 will be single quotation mark D, capital D. This is in contrast to how you save strings. With strings you do double quotation. Okay, so characters, like I say, are basically just strings of length 1, and you save them and you talk about them using single quotes rather than double quotes. Well, a string of English is, of course, composed of individual characters, right? Whenever you write a sentence, each individual letter and each space and each punctuation mark, all of those things are characters. So essentially the way the computer sees a string is it sees it as a string of characters, and this particular string, David space McCune return key, the computer sees it this way, as literally a little diagram like this, where here's character 1, character 2, character 3, character 4, etc. Unfortunately, what I just said is actually not how the computer sees the string. So I just said this is character 1, this is character 2, this is character 3. That's how we think of it. For whatever reason, whoever designed C++ decided this is character 0, not character 1. This is character 1, not character 2, etc. So when C++ starts counting and keeping track of positions, it starts counting at the number 0 rather than the position 1. And so here's just a diagram of what position number goes with each character. So D is in position 0, A is in position 1, etc. And so this string has 13 characters, so you count from 0 to 12. And sorry, these tables are slightly misaligned here, but character 10 is the letter N, and the return key, the return character, is character number 12. The last time I taught this, the students found this extremely obnoxious because when you write more sophisticated programs where you want to keep track of positions of things, it's very easy to forget that C++ keeps track starting at 0 rather than 1. So I'll tell you to be aware of it now, and I'm sure you will forget it, but as you write programs and you get more annoyed by that feature, you will remember more often. Okay, so if you have a string called anything, in this case called name, if you want access to the character at the ith position, so you want access to the 7th character or the 10th character or whatever, this is how you get access to it. You give it the name of the string, and then in square brackets, you give it the position. So for example here, if I say print to the screen the character at position 2 inside the string name, that's what this says here, right? The character at the 2nd position. Well, position 2 is V, right? So even though we think of V as being at the 3rd position, the computer counts it as being at the 2nd position. Okay, so there's one sort of cute thing I wanted to show you. There are lots of cute things in general, but here's one thing that's nice to know. You can take a character and make it either uppercase or lowercase if you want to, here's an example of that. Oh, but to do that, you need this hashtag include CC type. You need to put that up at the top of your program, next to the or below the hashtag include IOStream. So, for example, suppose that you're writing a program that's keeping track of people's names, and you are letting the user enter their name. You know, some people are lazy and they don't want to capitalize their name, but maybe inside your program, you want to make sure that all names are capitalized, right? So in this particular code segment here, if all that the user gives you is David with a lowercase d, if you ask the computer to print the character at position 0, it will print that first character, right, this little d. Suppose you want that little d to be capital. Well, what you do is you say, okay, here is the name. This is the location of the first character. What I'm going to do is use this command called toUpper. So a more rational name would have been capitalize, right? But you know, I'm not in charge of the function names. So toUpper will take that lowercase letter and make it uppercase. So what I've now done is I've overwritten the original lowercase d with an uppercase d. So I've literally told her, right, where there used to be a lowercase d, I want you to replace it with an uppercase d. So make that first character uppercase. So now, after all this code here, these 4 lines, if I ask the computer to print what the variable name is to the screen, it will print David to the screen with a capital D because I replaced that lowercase d with an uppercase d. And if you want to go backwards, if you want to use lowercase, you would just write a toLower here rather than toUpper. Okay, so now we're just going to talk about string functions for the rest of this video. So the first function to know about is a function that tells you the number of characters inside of a string. So if you have a string and you've called it S1, if you do S1.length and you need parentheses, empty parentheses here, it will tell you the number of characters. So for example, in this string here, this name string, there are 5 characters in David, the space character counts as a character, 6 characters in McCune, and then the return key character is a 13th character. So if you ask the computer, well, what is the length of the string name, it will print 13 to the screen. It will tell you. Okay, so anytime you want to know how many characters are inside of a string, all you do is the string name dot length, empty parentheses. So one thing that's worth emphasizing here is the length of a string is the number of characters in it, right? The number of characters. And the number of characters is a number, right? And in particular, it's a whole number. Therefore, anytime you use this function, you're going to get an integer out of it, right? A number of characters. Okay, here's another function. This is called the concatenation function. If you take 2 strings and add them together, right, you do string 1 plus another string and create a new string, it will literally just take the first string and then put the second string right to the end of it. It will append the second string to the first. So if I do S1 plus S2, it's just literally going to be David McCune, right? No space or anything because I haven't told it to give it a space. So this new string S3 is just the first string followed by the second string. So if I ask the computer to print what it thinks S3 is, it will print exactly this. Just my name with no space. So of course if you want it to print out a space, or if you want a space to be contained in the string S3, you can do string S3 is string S1 followed by a space followed by string 2. And now if you ask the computer to print out S3, it will actually print that space because that space is now part of the string S3. Okay, this next function is called the find function. And so imagine that you're writing a program where there are a bunch of strings floating around, and given a particular string, you want to know okay, so let me make sure I explain this properly. So imagine that you're writing a hangman program. Okay, so that's an example we looked at on the first day that I was there. If you're going to write a hangman program, you need a way to search a word for certain letters. Right? That's how hangman works. The first player has entered a word, And now what the program needs to do is it needs to search that word for a letter that somebody else guesses. And so this kind of function will let you do that. What you do is you hand it a string S1 and ask it, hey, can you please look for the string S2 inside of that? And I want you to start looking at a particular place. So what you'll do is you'll say, okay, can you please look for the word the? And I want you to start looking for the word the at position 5 or something like that. This function will allow you to do that. So let's just look at an example. Here's a string, it's my name, all lowercase. If you ask it, hey, what is name.find, and then in the parentheses, the string you want it to look for, so a lowercase d, and then 0. So you're telling it to start from the beginning. The second number is the position from which you want it to start looking for this d. It will tell you that it found d at position 0, right? The string starts with that. So one thing that maybe is not clear right now is you'll notice there are two little d's inside this string, right? A little d there and a little d there. This function will not print every occurrence of a little d for you, right? If you're going to ask it to search for the string S2, it's not going to print every occurrence of S2. What it's going to print is the first occurrence that it finds. So if I tell it to start looking at position 0, which is at the beginning, it's going to tell me where the first occurrence of a D occurs, and it occurred at position 0. So if I ask it, hey, find me inside of the string name, the string that just consists of a little d, but start looking from position 2. If you're going to start looking from position 2, now you're right here. Right? That's where you're going to start looking from. And so now it doesn't even see the first d because you've told it to start looking past that. So what it's going to do is print the number 4 to the screen because this little d right here is in position 4. Right? So here's position 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're telling it to start looking at position 2. So it's going to start with this V. So suppose you ask it, hey, inside the string name, please find me the substring D, and I want you to start looking from position 7. So, okay, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it's going to start looking right here at the C. Well, there is no little d past that little c, right? So it's going to search, and it's going to find nothing. So whenever it does that, the way it tells you it didn't find what you were looking for is it'll give you a -1. So this function either returns a non-negative whole number, it's like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, and that non-negative whole number tells you the first occurrence of this substring here, or it returns a -1, in which case it's telling you that it did not find what you were looking for. So again, imagine you're writing a Hangman program, and you ask it, hey, can you please search inside of this word for the letter R, because the user guessed the letter R. And suppose it searches and it doesn't find it. Then it will give you a -1 back, and that will be your clue that it didn't find that. Okay, so here's a function that lets you find substrings S2 inside of a bigger string S1, and it will tell you the first occurrence of such a thing. So before we leave this, notice that it's returning a position to you, and positions are whole numbers, right? Position 1, position 2, etc. So it's an integer is what it's giving back to you. So you can write things like this. Int x, and what I want x to be, I want it to be the place where you found substring D inside name, starting at position 7. Right, that makes sense to the computer because this quantity right here is by definition a whole number. But you can't write something like this, string x equals name.find, whatever, because again, this thing right here is a numeric data type. It's a number. And so you can't save it as a string unless you're willing to put quotes around the whole thing or something. Okay, so the next function is called the substring function, and what it allows you to do is grab substrings from a bigger string. So I have a string S1 going, and the way this function works is, well, it's called substra for substring, and you tell it the position where you want to start grabbing this piece that you're interested in, and how many characters you want to grab. Okay, so you're going to hand this function two numbers. The first number is where you want it to start looking, where you want it to start grabbing from, and how long the piece is that you want it to grab. So just for example here, suppose my string name is David McCune. This is a very self-centered naming process I have here. And suppose I let string s2 be string name dot substring 35. Okay? So literally in plain English, what happens is the computer creates a string s2, and it creates it by going to the original string name, going to the third position, so right here, so 0, 1, 2, 3, so you're at this little I, and it's going to grab the first 5 characters it sees. So it's going to grab these 5 characters, right? ID space MC, those 5 characters. So S2 will have the value of ID MC space MC, sorry. So that's what the computer will print if you ask it to print S2. Okay, so when you use this function, well, all of these functions take getting used to, right? So there are going to be all sorts of mistakes you're going to make until you've played with them enough. But the most common mistake to make with this function is that people think, oh, this first number is where I want it to start grabbing this piece, and the second number is where I want it to end grabbing the piece. So people think that both numbers are positions inside of the string. Okay, so, but that's not true. Only the first number is actually a position inside the string name. The second number is the number of characters you want it to get once you've established the start position. So it's not the ending position, right? In this particular string here, I is at position 3, and a space is at position 5, right? So if this function acted like that, S2 would just be ID space. Okay, but that's not what S2 is. S2 is start at position 3 and grab 5 characters. So it's longer than what you might think. Okay, so avoid that mistake. Yeah, so in contrast to the previous functions, when you do this sort of thing, when you grab substrings from a bigger string, you create a new string. Right? So this is not a numeric thing that you're getting anymore. You're getting a new substring. So you can have a command like this, right? String S2, and I want S2 to be this piece, this substring of the string name. So this is not numeric. Okay, so we just talked about grabbing a substring from a bigger string. Something else you might want to do is insert a string inside of another. And so the way that you do that is, if S1 is your string name that you want to insert into, you use the insert command, and the way it's written is like this: S1.insert, and you hand it a number first, and this first number is where you want it to start inserting, and then you hand it the string you want it to insert. So consider this line of code here, this code segment. So again, string name is just my name, and suppose that for whatever reason I want to insert my middle name into this string. Okay, I can do that, and I can do create a new string to do that if I want to. And so S2 will be the original string name, and I'm going to insert starting at position 6, which is, okay, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So starting right here, it's going to insert the middle name Mark. And so if I ask it to print S2 to the screen, it will print my entire name. Okay, so again, all this function does is, if you want to take a string called name or called whatever and insert another string inside of it somewhere, you can do it. You just have to use the insert function, and you give it the position where you want it to insert it, and give it the string. So here's another example here, right? So suppose I wanted to include my informal nickname, right? So I have created a new string, S3. Inside the original string, it now inserts, with quotes around it, right? See, backslash quote, it now inserts the string awesome, and it starts inserting it at position 5, which is right after the little d. So notice I have a space here. There's a space before the capital A, and that's now this little space here. Okay. I think this is the last function I want to talk about. So you can insert strings inside of other strings. You can also take a string and erase a piece from it. And so the way that this function works is, just like before, you take your string name, you do dot erase, and now you hand it two numbers. You hand it the position where you want it to start erasing. So if you wanted it to start erasing at position 2, you would hand it a 2. And then you tell it the length of the string you want to erase, or in other words, how many characters you want it to erase. So for whatever reason, if I have this name here, right, and it's David McCune like always, suppose that I want to erase starting at position 2, so starting at V, the first 6 characters that I see starting at position 2, which would be these 6 characters, VID space MC. The way I would do that is name.erase, start at position 2, and delete the first 6 characters you see. So the result of doing that is just a Dakun here, right? Because it's erased VID MC. Okay, so you maybe are asking yourself, why would I need to use these functions? What are these things good for, right? And we'll see some uses of them as the semester goes on, but again, let me reference the Hangman program that I showed you on the first day with you. If you're going to write a Hangman program that ran the way that ours ran, remember that it showed you a hidden word with asterisks, right? The asterisks sort of covered up the hidden letters that you're uncovering. And so what the students literally did was they used these functions over and over again to deal with user guesses. So if a user guesses a correct letter, then what you have to do is you have to take that string of asterisks and erase the asterisk where the letter is, and then insert that letter into the string of asterisks. Okay, so if you have, like take the word, whatever, oxygen, right? That's what we did in class. So you have a string of 6 asterisks, and suppose the user guessed the letter O. What the student's code did was it erased the first asterisk from the string of asterisks using this command here, and then it inserted the letter O at the beginning of the string using the insert command. So there's one example of where you might use these functions, right? Writing a Hangman program. Let me just quickly show you to end the video another example. Okay, so what this is going to do is it's going to ask the user what they think of me. Okay, so what do you think of Dr. McCune, right? And then, in case you've forgotten, we're expecting the users to enter more than one word, right? So we don't want to do this. We don't want to write C in input because, as you'll remember from the last video, if you do that, this will only record the first word they give you. Okay, it'll only record up until the first space. So we don't want to do that because we're anticipating them writing multiple words, right? They might not, but in case they do, you use the getLine command. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, and start. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to find the first instance of a string that I'm going to call bad. And so, of course, I haven't declared that variable yet, so let me tell you what that bad string is. So consider the string that looks like this. DON''T space like, right? So that's the string. So I'm going to ask the computer to find the first instance inside of this input that the user gives of the word, of the phrase don't like. And what I'm going to do is, well, if somebody says they don't like me, I don't particularly like that, so I will erase that instance. So I'm going to erase it at position start, and I'm going to erase as many characters as need to be erased. Okay, so, I misspelled line. Okay, so let's make sure we understand the logic of these two lines of code. Input is now a string that contains the English that the user gave, right? And I'm going to find the first instance of the bad string, right, of don't like inside of there because I'm telling it to start searching at the beginning, at position 0. So this literally says, find the first occurrence of the bad string inside of the input. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take input and I'm going to erase that phrase from it. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to tell it where to start looking. Well, where do I start looking? I start looking from where I found that phrase, right? I found that phrase at position 5 or whatever, right? Start might be 5. So tell it to start looking from there and then erase the length of that phrase. Right? That'll now erase all, what is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It'll erase those 10 characters. And then I'm going to put something I like in there instead. So let me just insert this instead. Okay, so the logic of these 3 lines of code, again, is it found the first instance of this bad string and recorded where it found that. So what I did was I told it, go to that place where you found that and erase what you saw, right? Erase the first characters of the length of the bad string, and instead insert this phrase. So now let's just see what all this does by outputting to the screen. Let me just tell the user, you meant to say, let me put quotes. Yeah, you meant to say, so this is going to output some quotes here. Make sure that goes. Okay. Yeah, so the output was already there, right? So now I can write something like, I don't like him, right? That's a response you might say. But you didn't really mean that, I don't know why you're angry, right? And why you're taking it out on me, but you don't mean that. So you meant to say, I love him, right? Although I messed up the code a little bit. Boom. Okay. So let's run this again and make sure I did it right this time, right? So again, who knows why you're writing the crazy things you write, right? But we both know you don't mean this, right? But you might say this. I don't like Dr. McEwen, right? Well, let me correct that for you. You meant to say this, right? Make sure the spacing is right. And one more time, right? I don't like. I love. Okay, so here's an example of using those functions, right? You can write a program that corrects people to say things that they actually meant rather than the literal things they said. Okay, that's it.